Well, welcome to this Rainmaker Digital Services Q&A. Today we're talking about becoming an authority in your niche. I'm David Brandon with Rainmaker, and I'm here with Julia McLish, the owner of Barkeep Supply and Lunar Lounge. She's a friend of mine and has really been a success in a particular niche here in the Oklahoma City market, and thought her experience might be really useful for people who are trying to build authority in their niche. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about kind of what you've done a little bit. So if I understand right, you were a bartender for a long time, worked a lot of different places around town. And from the site, it says that you were looking for ingredients and realized there was no real place to buy them. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. As a bartender, you have access to all these tools and ingredients that you don't necessarily find out in the world because they're brought to you by, reps or by, distributors that don't have storefronts. So when I was looking to make old fashions for my family for Christmas, I was having a hard time finding cherries. I was having a hard time finding bitters. And so those were kind of my inspiration pieces about opening a store. I wanted to have all that kind of stuff available to the general public that is easily available to bartenders, but not necessarily available to just regular people.
Right, and in this particular market, Oklahoma City isn't a huge area. We have 600,000 people, I think, in our major metropolitan area, and then about 1 million in the bigger media market. So there aren't a lot of some of these niche stores that you might have in a market like LA, or LA's 4 million, New York's 7 million people, or even in Miami's 3 something, I think. There's just not the same support here.
That's true.
So in 2018, you started Barkeep Supply. Now, you were working as a bartender at the time. Did you just go straight from bartending to this?
No, I was actually on maternity leave. So
okay.
I used my time off while I was pregnant to research and develop business plans and do all the stuff that I needed to do to get the store open. I spent a lot of time on the internet and on the computer and
That's right, I forgot that.
doing all that stuff while I was sitting at home. So by the time 2018 rolled around, my daughter was born in 2017. I just few months later, maybe half a year later, I quickly just took it off.
Sweet. And so you kind of did you just bootstrap it?
Yeah, definitely. It was a real one step at a time kind of thing. I was just curious, so I started doing a little market research and saying, is there anything like this anywhere nearby? I started kind of researching how to create an LLC and how to, do all the things that opening a business requires. And like I said, I did it one step at a time. I was like, let me look about an LLC. Okay, I'll get an LLC. And then I, looked into getting a liquor license, looked into getting the business license, all that stuff. And before I knew it, I was already kind of halfway there. So I was like, well, let's do it.
And I think this is interesting just in terms of our audience. A lot of the people who are on Rainmaker platform, a lot of the people that we talk to aren't marketers by trade. They don't do this as a day job.
Yeah.
So it is interesting, you also aren't a marketer by trade.
No, I have zero business experience.
So you went from bartending to running a store to now running 2 full-time businesses. Yeah.
On the job training, which you learn as a bartender. You can't really learn to bartend anywhere else besides just doing it and working the job. And that's what I've learned with this retail, is that just learn as I go. Fake it till you make it.
And I feel like it's one of those things, because I love cocktails, as you know, I go to a lot of different places around town, and this is, there's a few places around town that have a fair bit of influence in terms of cocktail culture in the city. This is definitely one of them. I would say the premier one, but I'm biased. But it is really interesting, that you went from, you were a person who was doing it for a living, and now you've built that into this authority, with Lunar Lounge and with Barkeep, with other people like Dylan, who's mixing over there, and who else is over at the other? Zach and Gabby and Jose, and there's a whole culture here where you've built an authority around these two places, which is really cool.
Thank you.
And that's, this is, we're in the Barkeep supply store right now. You can just kind of see behind me, but it's not a super big space. There's a little 4-seat bar over there. There's a few shelves of bitters and books and things around here. And then down the hall, there's a speakeasy concept that you opened in 2022 based off the success of this. I think that's just a really cool something for our audience to look at, is like, how do you go from somebody who's interested in doing something, who has experience in something, who might be doing something as a hobby. Whoop, that's my light. To somebody who's actually like a business owner in this. So that's what we're kind of going to get into here. If anybody has any questions in here, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but feel free to shout them out. I'll take them over the headphones, or you can drop them in the chat and I'll see them when I tab over to this window. So, and we'll have some spots in here where I'll ask for questions, input, whatever as well. So as a marketer, we talk about authority. Authority is basically like, do people listen when you talk, right? Like Robert Cialdini talks about authority coming originally from titles, from clothes, from the trappings of office and of power. It's no longer that simple in the digital era, when everything is just available and visible online. So, when we talk about authority, there's 3 main ways that that's built that you've used here that we're going to kind of walk through. One is quality of the product and or the service. One is accolades from people and organizations with authority of their own. And 3 is consistently delivering content showcasing your expertise. And again, like, you're not a marketer by training, but this is something I feel like people overthink a lot. In that marketing, like we talk about the tools, we talk about the channels, as if they're the most important thing in the world. But really what marketing comes back to is the same thing. I mean, probably your job as a bartender trained you for this to a certain degree. It's just like building relationships with people, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So first we're going to talk about the quality of the product or the service. I think this is one of the most crucial things. I was actually talking, I don't know if you saw today, there's some of the Marvel stuff. They were talking about it's in hot water because they've kind of lowered the quality as it's gone on, and so they're dealing with people are not watching it as much. And I think this is something that you've done really well here is, for the retail side, obviously in Oklahoma City market, there's not really much competition. I'd say you're the only specialty bar store.
Yeah, there's another kind of bar supply store that's more
commercial.
Yeah, more commercial.
Which one is that you're talking about?
Parks.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Not a lot of people would know about it. It's more of just like a place that restaurants and bars know of. But they don't carry the cocktail focused tools and items like we do here.
Yeah. So in terms of, you can go down to like the liquor store and get like the cheap shaker or something like that, or a handful of you can't see it. There's literally a whole wall of different bitters that I'm looking at right now. You might get 1 or 2 different types at the local liquor store. There's no competitors here for the quality. The quality of the product is high.
Right. Yeah.
And there's no real competition outside of online here locally. So that quality of the product and service is there, which I think is key.
Yeah. I've definitely tried out almost everything in the store and kind of carefully curated it in a way. The tools I usually try to make sure I try out before I commit to buying a whole bunch of them and before I recommend them to people. So I know people do trust our recommendations, so I take that pretty seriously.
Right, and I think that's one of the keys is when you're building authority, you can say you want to talk authority on something. You can say literally, I mean, the amount of people at local cocktail bars that I've seen come in here, hey, I need a shaker, hey, I need a spoon, hey, what's the, what syrups do you have, what bitters do you have? This is stuff that professionals use.
Right, yeah.
So the quality is there.
Yeah, there's definitely tools available that are not professional grade, and I definitely steer away from those. That's not what I'm trying to recommend or trying to sell, and the price might be a little bit higher, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah. And I think there is a place for those things, right? Like, if you're just going to a liquor store and you're just trying to get your feet wet with something,
or
get
just
the
order
cheap
it off
shit
of
or whatever.
Amazon.
Yeah, or order it off Amazon. But what we're talking about is establishing authority in a niche, someplace where you have a community of hobbyists and people that know what they're doing and are interested in it. So, you have to come correct, right?
Yes.
Like, otherwise you don't get a second chance at making a first impression.
That's true. Yeah. I take that really seriously too. I think just as me as a person, I always feel it's important to remain trustworthy and to be taken seriously,
Yep.
And I would be embarrassed if I recommended something and it was just a piece of garbage. I couldn't do it. So
Yeah. And I think too, like, we talked about the retail a little bit. I think also you look at the hospitality offerings, both in terms of the quality of the product and the the quality of the service. Like, you guys have done a really good job of making sure that's really good across the board.
Yeah, I kind of have a saying that if garbage goes in, garbage comes out. So
Right.
I try to maintain quality of ingredients, like squeezing my juice fresh and making all the simple syrups fresh and putting good liquor in drinks.
Yep.
Making sure the garnishes look nice. And
So when you do that, that builds authority with people who are, fellow bartenders or
Yeah.
restaurant owners or food writers like Tracy over there. They can't see you, but I'm telling them you're here. It does help that you're already part of the community. If you're trying to build authority in a community, it helps that you can speak the language, you can walk the walk, you can talk the talk. I think a lot of people who kind of come from a business background do this backwards. Where it's like, okay, what's a good niche? What's a place that's not being served? Let me jump in here and serve that niche. And then, you come in, like the "how do you do, fellow kids" meme, and like, they're like, no, like, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what our needs are. You don't know what we want to hear from you, and that actually kills your authority.
yeah,
You
does
know,
more damage than it does anything.
Yeah, and I think you've done a good job of this. I think Chris Stapleton, the country artist, is actually a really good example of this too, where it's like he'd been a session musician for 20, 30 years and just like built that reputation. So when he launched his first, serious album, it took off.
Yeah.
The same, it's like you're part of that community already, so you already have an established rapport there.
Exactly, and I feel like, people a lot of times don't trust somebody who, say, just opens a bar and has never bartended before, or
Right.
Opens a bar store and has never bartended before. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. So I feel like you do have to put in your time, and kind of make a name and a reputation for yourself a little bit before you jump into something like that.
And I don't think it's impossible to do that if you're like listening to the community and getting in people who kind of know what they're doing.
You have to be taking it very seriously.
But it's uphill sledding in a way that it's not if you're already part of that community. So another way that you can build authority is through accolades from people, organizations that have their own authority. So in this case, we talk about like food writers, Tracy and Greg, and even some of the TikTok people like Emily Phillips. You caught on early with a lot of the people who had authority. Did they just come in like by chance? Or?
Yeah, Tracy was one of our very first customers. He came in during our first Midtown Walkabout, which is a kind of a street event that takes place in our district. And we didn't even have anything in the store yet. And he had just seen it on Instagram, heard about it, and came in, and I let him come in and check out the store.
Social media, Steve.
Yeah. And Greg, I think that, he just has an ear on the streets, and he always is aware of everything new that's opening. So he came in very early on as well. And I think that just being genuine and them recognizing that I'm, trying to do something special, I think that they got hooked in that way. They knew that I was trying to take it seriously.
Yeah, and I went looking for like there's a lot of different stuff about Barkeep and Lunar on 405 and some of the other magazines around the area where it picked up pretty early. I think too you can talk about like some of the institutions that have authority around here, you know, where like I think the one big one that comes to mind is like the USBG, US Bartending Guild. Like the local chapter does these what they call bartender smackdowns. You can see on the slide here. And their competitions were different. Cocktail crews will go head to head doing competitions where they, you know, build a bunch of different cocktails, you know, sometimes with mystery ingredients or going for speed, going for quality. And you guys, there's a handful that have won it a bunch of times, R&J's, Frida, and you guys.
Yep.
Yeah, so even it's a big like industry event. It's all like bartenders and food industry people. They all go, and that's, you know, kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Establishing that authority, you know, having, you know, if there's outside organizations that can transfer some of that authority to you, if you're doing good work and can prove it.
Yes.
Then I think also just like, I mean, I'm kind of fudging numbers here because I think I'm on the low side, but there's, you know, in the community, you've built a reputation because of there's suppliers that you regularly work. I think like Wonderful comes to mind, Josh over at Artisan, just here. You know, there's several different suppliers that, you know, work regularly with this place, and at least there's a bunch of, I mean, literally every time I'm here, I run into people from different bars and restaurants around town where it's, you know, sometimes owners, sometimes people who work there, you know, kind of from the office all the way down to the floor. You know, there's an authority conferred by those people caring about this place.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And just building relationships with those kind of people has definitely kind of been important to our success, I think.
So I think like when we talk about where authority comes from, you know, there's those different things that we've talked about, and I think also that consistent delivery of content. That's the third thing that we talked about is, you know, delivering content. And it's interesting because in your case, like a lot of what we talk about with our client base isn't stuff that you've been doing. You know, like we do a lot of like people that do courses, people that do email lists, people that do, you know, I think you have kind of an ad hoc text list, but there's no like full-on SMS marketing program, which I'll talk to you about later. But no, it's one of those things where it's like there's a certain amount of triage you have to do as a business owner, right? You have to focus on whatever gets you the most results for the least input. You know, I think in this case it's been, you know, we've seen the results. It's worked, the stuff that you've done. Again, this comes back to like people overcomplicate the idea of marketing, focusing on the channel and not the tools. You know, to really, you know, to succeed, it's about building relationships with people. And in this case, delivering content that showcases your expertise means like social media. You've done a really good job of, I think I've got it on the slide here. Yeah. Publishing your own cocktails and your products on Instagram. And in your case, the platforms that tend to work really well are like Instagram.
Instagram is probably
Instagram's
the
big
biggest one.
Yeah.
Facebook, I just don't see much anymore. I think it's kind of, you know, dropping off a little bit.
Well, and I think in your case, like you have a very visual product, which helps. Like for us, you know, Instagram's not necessarily as big of a vector.
For me, Twitter wouldn't make sense. Really.
Exactly.
So it just kind of depends on what you're doing.
You know, well, we were talking with Steve Orr earlier. I think Steve's still in here. Like Steve mentioned, you know, maybe Twitter for his business, and it's like, yeah, that makes sense for you. You know, whereas something like, you know, Discord or Reddit or Instagram, you know, different channels. There is a lot of crossover, but people go to channels for different things. I think you've used social media smartly in that way. I think also the UGC is what we call user-generated content, right? So stuff like Emily Phillips coming in and doing her TikTok videos in here, you know, really has a big impact. And you guys push that out on your own stores whenever you see people. Yeah,
reposting stuff that other people are posting about our store, whether they take home things to make cocktails with and then post about it. It's kind of really fun for us to see.
Yeah, and I feel like I see that pretty regularly.
Tracy does a good job of that.
So that you've done that with social media. There's also the aspect of like consulting where you've helped create menus for other restaurants and bars. You've trained bartenders for other hospitality groups and other restaurants. It's Emily Brake, who her crew actually won the SmackDown this past Sunday. She got some training from you.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you've probably forgotten, but she mentioned it when I
That's
first
awesome.
met her, that she actually got some training from you. And then like events and things, crossover events with other local bars and restaurants, collaborations with local ingredient suppliers, classes, there's happy hours, and you've done some of the like underground concert things here and that. This is for a local business, right? So there's a brick and mortar location and there's, a physical space where these things can happen. But, if you're digital only, you can translate that too. You can run, this is a digital event. We have people who are here, engaging with us live. There are opportunities to consult with other people, to do collaborations. With my basketball stuff, I've done this a lot where there was a period where for the Thunder, I would do just like, hey, here's the week ahead in games and contact like bloggers and podcasters who cover those teams and just say, hey, here's 3 questions. We'll just put this together and our audience is crossed. Same sort of deal as the consulting services and the events. You can translate this from the physical to the digital, right? Because it's not the medium, it's the message.
Yeah, I believe so. I think social media has a big influence on that, and collaborating in different ways on social media is really popular.
Yeah.
So whether it's like giveaways or like, post for post or anything like that, it's just to be visible and involved.
I'm actually curious, I didn't ask you about this beforehand, I probably should have. Is there anything that's like what's made the most impact, you think, as far as like this stuff, like content or collaborations?
You mean between content or collaborations? Which made the most?
Well, no, I mean like of all the things that you've done over the past 6 years or so, 5-6 years, what's made the most impact on the business? Is it like a particular collaboration or somebody posting on TikTok or?
TikTok lately has been kind of a huge tool. So in recent times, I think that's the one that sticks out the most. When somebody that has a ton of followers and a lot of authority on TikTok creates a video, it can really do something for your business. Like I noticed multiple people coming in just because of one post. And when I say multiple, I mean, 20s and 50s and, at Lunar Lounge, hundreds.
Yeah. I remember the first weekend that you were open, there was literally, I don't think you guys were prepared for how much attention you were going to get immediately.
Yeah, and that came from OKC Talk. When he did his post on us, we had a lot of interaction on that post and got a lot of people in the door from there.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that you can showcase your expertise through content and these sorts of collaborations. So here's just a couple of examples. I just kind of took a sampling of what showed up when I searched, Lunar and Barkeep. Like I said, like you have the benefit, the daiquiris on the bottom left. You have the benefit of like a fairly photogenic product, which again for like some businesses is not necessarily the case. But yeah, it's a couple of things from the Instagram as well. I don't have a question slide here, but I am going to just take a pause and say, like, if anybody has any questions, either here in house or, hi Tracy. If anybody has any questions or comments or things that they want to touch on, Dylan is looming. Steve?
I was going to ask earlier, have you do you have the formal qualification, or has your authority been built by your reputation, what you've done, what you've said?
He was asked. Steve asked, "Do you have a formal qualification, or has your authority just been built by what you've done or what you've said?"
Not a formal qualification, no. Just from what I've done.
Yeah.
It obviously hasn't held you back.
Obviously hasn't held you back.
Right.
Yeah. No, and I don't think there is. I mean, to her point earlier, this is an industry. Some industries do have. I mean, I think yours, Steve, like would probably lean on credentials a little bit more. In this one, a lot of it is just, can you do the work? Same with like marketing. There's a lot less with credentials and a lot more like, are you able to do the thing that you say you can do, and proving that over time. I think that's essential in any industry, but some do lean more on credentials than others. Does that answer?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I do think in the business I'm in, which is it's basically in my life been IT work, it is you do have to be able to just do the job. You have to go in very quickly, especially if you're a consultant, quickly and just do it, show you can do it, demonstrate that. If you're trying to build authority with people, then I found more than when I started, people are interested in these qualifications, and there's a qualification industry that builds up very fast.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I often ask myself, by what authority are you saying we can hand out the qualifications? Where are you coming
Right.
from?
Yeah.
It seems that no sooner has something started that somebody started up and says, hey, we are the authority in here, get your qualifications for us and pay us to take the course.
There are courses you can take and things like that you can use to build authority, that strengthen your resume and things like that. But in this industry, it's such a creative one that it's kind of hard to pin down that exact kind of qualification. It's more.
I do wonder, to your point, Steve, I mean, I do feel like this kind of the cocktail renaissance is a relatively new thing. I do wonder if you're going to see more of that sort of like credential boom something like Valkyrie in Tulsa is another like pretty big cocktail bar, and they do a very structured like
training program.
I do wonder if that sort of thing's going to catch on more as the industry. I don't want to say matures because it's been around for a long time, but this particular like level of cocktail bartending is about the last. I guess you could call it kind of DeGroff era is when, so 20 plus years, 25 years,
and
maybe.
in Oklahoma even later.
And in Oklahoma, not at all.
Yeah.
So I do think when you get into an industry as it matures, you probably will see sort of that credential proliferation that you mentioned. So it is an interesting thing to.
You do have to, there's certain licenses and things you have to have, and you have to go through like certain training on alcohol safety and things like that. Like that, there's definitely things that you have to do. So, not just anybody can get behind a bar and start serving drinks to people. So there are some kind of things that you have to follow for sure.
But yeah, no, the licensing thing is interesting. Anything else before we move on?
No, just I look with envy at what you described as the photogenic nature of this business. I really have to scratch my head and think hard if I'm trying to make an image or a picture of what I do.
Yeah.
Can't just photograph it. Like I've got a friend who set up a business, starting very successfully, with flowers coming over, and of course it's wonderful. They just take pictures, but we haven't actually got anything like that in IT.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, I try and get creative.
I think in situations like that, it's either you go more abstract with the visuals, or you do kind of how to. I mean, you get into it becomes more expensive, but you can do like illustration stuff on YouTube. Like, okay, how does I'm just thinking IT off the top of my head. Like, how does SSL work? Like you could do like a graphic of that, but obviously you got to pay for the graphic, and it's a lot easier to, take a picture of something, even if you're not a pro, and make it look good than it is to get graphics of things. I should take a note of this actually. I might kind of go down sometime down the line, do a dispatch on, doing visual content if you're not a photogenic business, because we're not a photogenic business either. So it matters for me too.
I'm very interested in the prospect of AI for illustrations. Like the courses I run, people can use it if they got a mobile phone, cell phone, they can obviously do it anywhere. And so I thought I could maybe use AI to say people using their cell phone on a bus, etc., etc. and pictures coming up like that. So that could be a good future for me.
I don't think it's quite there yet, but
We're using AI generated responses to reviews and to make Instagram captions and things like that. So we have a platform that we use that uses AI right now. It's kind of interesting.
they're not bad captions. Like, I'm a writer by trade. They're not bad captions.
Yeah, I usually edit them in some way or like kind
Yeah.
of fluff it up a little bit because they can come off kind of cold.
Yep.
But it's kind of worth the ideas for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for that.
Yeah. Interesting frontier to be aware of moving forward. So, okay. Talk a little bit more about kind of things that you've done to build authority. I think overarching ideas that anyone can apply across any business. Like, number one is claim a niche. If you want to be an authority in something, the narrower the better. It's not just, I think, focusing on cocktails specifically or wine specifically, or, in a larger market even, if there was more competition, you might even go like as deep as a specific, like, hey, we're the classics store, or we're the tiki store, or something like that, as opposed to even just kind of the all under one roof that you have here. The more competition you have, the narrower you have to be in your niche, unless you have big financial backing and clout behind you. And I think too, like when you talk about narrow, it opens up more opportunities for collaboration with other people too. You can say like, we're good at this, but so-and-so's better. I think there's like, I don't know that you can necessarily say this 100%, but there's places that like R&J specializes in classics, or like Flamingo in Paseo specializes in tiki. As you guys are kind of got your hands in a lot of different pies.
Yeah.
And you can build those mutually beneficial relationships with other suppliers and people that have complementary skill sets or product. And I think too, I think this, even with the cocktails and things, like we've talked about this, you have a kind of a particular niche that you can do a lot of different stuff, but there's a particular niche of cocktail that you tend to gravitate toward. You do a lot of like the fruitier, like bright,
Me personally,
citrusy.
yeah, I do, yeah. And I think as a whole at Barkeep here, we focus on creative and like innovative cocktails, and not as much on, we can do all the classics and things like that, but all of our menus contain cocktails that are truly unique and different than anything else you can get.
Yeah, and I think in that keeping it narrow, like you have other people on board, like Dylan over there, who's good at like a lot of Amari-based cocktails and that sort of thing. Or like Brenna was just one of the most
wacky, or like cheese.
Yeah, like you.
Yeah.
There's
Secret
no
ingredient
these ingredients should not work together. And so like each person on the team, you can be narrow in your niche, and then as it expands out, from just you, or like you and Brenna, when it first started, like each person kind of has things that they do really well, and you kind of slot into those.
Yeah.
And it expands naturally, as opposed to being something you just kind of come out of the gate like, we're going to do all these things at a like 60% grade.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely was gradual, and it depends on your team for sure.
I think too, one cool thing that you've done, and I am curious, I didn't actually ask you about this, I am curious if this was intentional or unintentional, or a mixture of both. You've created some really powerful hooks for user-generated content. So like Thursday at Lunar Lounge is, now you're doing the poll cocktail, where it's like, here's a set of like different ingredients, you guys all vote on this on Instagram, and we'll make something with that.
Yeah.
Or like the Dirtbag Thursday was Brenna's thing. It's like, here's these incredibly down market ingredients that we're going to make into something delicious.
Yeah, that's been a really fun one. And Dylan's having a lot of fun with that one too.
Yeah, he seems like he is.
Yeah.
There's a regular reason to engage and come back, and your audience
Yeah.
to come talk with you.
Yeah.
The speakeasy door is an obvious branding feature.
Yeah.
That's huge. Basically, you can't see it, but there's to get into the other bar, the Lunar Lounge, you hit a button on the wall, and a panel on the wall swings out. So it's a hidden door. And it is the one thing, when I look at TikTok and Instagram, everyone posts.
Yeah. Everybody wants to get a video of them opening the door, which is good.
And I
you
think,
want to generate
yeah.
social media content like that.
And I think too, like the cocktails, you know, I think you're designing for aesthetics as much as you are for taste on a lot of these too. You know, there's some of the stuff where you've added like kind of the purple flower extract and that sort of thing. Like, so how intentional is this opposed to just a natural outgrowth of the business and just, you know, being what it is?
For Lunar Lounge, it was pretty intentional. We knew that, you know, social media is really important, and we wanted to create a space where people wanted to take pictures. That's why we have the huge Lunar Lounge logo on the wall,
yeah.
that people like to stand in front of and take photos. Whether it's the round neon mirror in the bathroom with the cool wallpaper, we get a lot of people taking selfies on that. That was very intentional choices that we made to encourage people to create content for their own pages and to kind of market for us, basically. The door especially, we knew that that was going to be a huge selling point for the bar as a whole. So I think at Lunar Lounge it was definitely very intentional. The drinks being pretty is definitely intentional. It's really dark in there, so you kind of want to make sure that the drinks stand out in some way.
Yeah.
So like this menu, I had to put on a bright blue drink that looks like a snowball for our winter menu, and that's already selling really well. Just things like that to try to get people's attention and want to encourage them to take photos and post.
I think too, like being a good citizen in your community, there are people, I will just say this to get it out of the way, there are people who build a reputation on being the contrarian, on being the grump, or the you know, person who stands apart. But I think as a general rule, and I'm kind of this way, and I think you as across the board are kind of this way, like you catch more flies with honey than vinegar.
Yeah,
you know?
we try to make everything really, really approachable, because no one wants to walk into a bar where you're feeling like everybody's being pretentious or snobby, or, you know, you're not welcome. That's the opposite of what you want to do. But for some reason, some bars have kind of created that sort of atmosphere. And I think it's just, as a passion for their product, they're probably doing it intentionally. But for us, we just want to make sure that's like the focus of our businesses, is to make sure that everyone feels welcome, comfortable, they feel at ease to ask any questions they want about any product that they want. And that, I think, especially for Barkeep, has been like the biggest kind of selling point for us, just because we just want everybody to feel comfortable buying things and trying things and experimenting and having fun.
And that, I think, allows you to build a relationship with an audience beyond just, you know, yes, you know, with the relationships you already have, you know, with the people who are hardcore consumers, you can build that reputation quickly. But if you want to expand it outside your immediate audience, being a good citizen in your community, being welcoming and open and approachable, you know, has a ton of merit.
I don't see any other way you could do it.
There are business, like you said, there are businesses that kind of do that, but it's like if you are just like hardcore crowd, if you are just, and that's the only crowd you ever want to court, maybe you can get away with it. But I think if you're any business that has a little more mass appeal, I think it's just a better way to be as a human. But that's
yes, David, I know there are people who want to intimidate others with their authority.
Yes, and I think actually, to your point, Steve mentioned like people that want to intimidate other people with their authority. I think that's something you could get away with more before the rise of social media.
Yeah, because, you know, right now, especially with social media and the internet in general, I mean, anybody can kind of research and learn on their own. And so, you know, it's just easier to kind of gain knowledge than it has been before.
That's a really good point. It's like basically your competition has grown, you know, so in a lot of cases, something that was what you would call a non-differentiated product, you know, where it's something unique, something you don't have a lot of places to get, you know, you can buy this stuff on Amazon, and in a lot of cases, it's probably a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, for sure. But,
you know,
and, you know, we don't really have any online sales. We don't have a website that sells like e-commerce or anything like that. So for us, our pulling point is that you get to come in and touch it and feel it and know that it's going to be the right thing for you, and to get personalized recommendations from us and things like that. It definitely has its weaknesses, but I think that it's what a lot of people kind of like. So
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like we talked about e-commerce before, I think it's more a matter of bandwidth than anything else
Yeah.
too. Like,
yeah, that's for sure.
but yeah, in like right now, that's definitely the case. Questions, comments, or examples? I think we Steve jumped in a little bit. If you have, if anyone has anything, otherwise I'll keep going.
Yeah, the only thing I was wondering at this point, it all seems to be going really well, and I really admire the way you've done that. Have you got imitators now trying to copy from what you've done?
Not with the store necessarily, but yeah, I think there's been some interest in like opening a store somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see, like, I think as a matter of market size, I don't know how much, I don't know if the Oklahoma City market can support more than it might be able to support two.
Yeah.
If you stuck one way up north, but you know, it's a hard, there's not the audience to support multiple stores of the same type, I think.
Yeah, Oklahoma City is still pretty small town. So.
You know, if you were in a bigger market, I think it would spawn imitators. Just by virtue of like, there is a niche there that needs serving, and in a larger market, you know, I do think you would see more of this sort of thing happening. But in terms of the store specifically, I mean, in terms of the cocktails and stuff, I don't know, like probably. What was the joke Mover and Shaker did is like, hey, nice recipe. It's like, thanks, I stole it from Sam.
It's hard to take credit for any given drink, really. In general.
Yeah, so everything's kind of built on somebody else's work. So.
Not yet. Nope.
Yes. I mean, I think as the market grows, you know, I could see in 5-10 years, maybe you could get to a point, especially if the current rate of people moving in. But I mean, I think this is something to keep in mind if you are in a, you know, it does depend on market size if you're going to have competitors. So we do have some questions that we've had sent in already. And if you or anybody else has questions, you know, anyone here in the room or anybody online, feel free to shout them out too. So the first question we had, this is kind of a me question, is what is UGC? We've already touched on this. It's user-generated content. Basically anything that people post about you that doesn't involve you. We want positive UGC, which is something we talked about driving a lot today. We don't want negative, but if people are talking about us, they're talking about us. This asks about an email list. I know who this is. I'll reach back out to him because we've mentioned there is no email list just based on bandwidth. I'm sure at some point, like email or SMS. SMS is probably going to be a better option for you, but like that's something where, you know, long term it probably makes sense, but it's just, like I said, bandwidth. Best ways to repurpose content. What would be the best ways to repurpose content? This is mostly, I think, a me question, but I'll throw a couple things over to you for this. You know, I think like right now what we're doing, like we're doing this Q&A live, we'll record it, we'll have some pieces that we'll cut out, we'll also have the whole thing on YouTube. There'll probably be pieces that I use in a dispatch that I write as a blog for our site. There's going to be things that we put on social media, quotes from this, you know, and different things. If you have video or audio content, short clips are a great way to repurpose. Transcripts can be turned into articles. I think if you're talking content that's already on social media, like you talked about, is reposting other people's stuff, or you know, TikTok duet type. I mean, not duet, but you know what I mean.
Like, yeah, we repost any picture usually taken, like say at Lunar Lounge, of someone taking a picture of their cocktail or taking selfies with them and their friends. We like to repurpose that on our page to show people having a good time at our bars.
And is that ever like transformative or just kind of additive? Do you know what I mean by that? Or
It's additive, I think. It's just
you're just kind of like,
yeah.
here it is, and
Yeah,
like,
I don't
here's
really
great, thank
transform
you,
much
you
of
know.
it. I just kind of showcase what people are doing.
Yeah. So I know who this is as well. I'll touch base with him about that too, because I think I know what he's getting at. What's been the most impactful thing you've done to build community around your business?
I think the takeovers are probably the most impactful thing. So working together with other local businesses has been probably the most. That's where we make our friends, our connections. That's how we get referrals from other bars, because we host other bars and doing events together, and therefore we kind of create a community around us in that way. So we've made a lot of friends from, you know, hosting other bars to come and bartend with us and collaborate with us and make cocktails with us, and we cross promote with customers and things like that too.
Yep.
So that's probably the biggest thing I would say for community building.
And I think like you can take that to the digital sphere. If you don't have a brick and mortar location like Julia does, you know, like guest posting's a huge thing. I'm actually talking with somebody about maybe doing some guest posting on our site. There's a reason it's still around. It works. Podcasting, having people on as guests who you interview who are complimentary to your COMPLE, not I, who are complementary to your business, you know, or, you know, have crossover with your audience. You know, we talked about that when we had Business Radio X on. You know, there's a few different things that you can do digitally that hit that same niche. Again, marketing is not, we can focus on the channel, you know, you can get caught up in the trees, but the forest is, it's talking to people. It's building relationships with people and, you know, building your audience that way. And whether you're brick and mortar or digital, it applies the same way for both. Another question we have here, and I think this is the last one of our pre-sent questions, so if you have any, drop them in the chat or just speak up. So for this, it's what advice would you have for a niche business that isn't brick and mortar but wants to build authority, kind of like you have?
I think that trustworthiness is a big thing. So I think being genuine and having a approachable demeanor is probably the best way to build authority or to start gaining people's trust. So I think gaining people's trust, however you can do that in your niche, is probably the most important. So just kind of keeping and holding on to integrity and just being open to everybody that wants to come to you, basically.
Yep, and we've touched on a lot of different ways to do that in this session. Do we have any more questions before we kind of finish this up here? If not, we'll go ahead and wrap this. We'll put the recording online. As per usual, I'm gonna put together the video of this. We'll make it available, send it to the registrants. It'll be on our YouTube channel as well. We'll share some bits on our social media. Thank you to everybody who's shown up, and to all of you who will see this later, who signed up to see the video. We appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Julia, for being here and giving us your time and your advice. And see y'all later. Appreciate it.